You are listening to the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast, where you discover management insights and strategies for your successful dental practice. There are also interviews with key people in the industry who have advice and services to help you and your team achieve great success. Welcome to this episode of the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's been showing up repeatedly in my consulting work, and it's something that can cause an element of frustration for practice owners, but it is actually rarely discussed openly. It's about those long-term loyal team members who are actually also the ones putting the brakes on every growth initiative that the practice owners are trying to implement. Now, if you're one of those team members, as you're listening to this episode, please stay with me because this conversation is here for you too. I promise I'm not here to criticize anyone. What I am here to do is to help us all understand why this dynamic happens and what we can do about it. So from my perspective, I'll be honest with you, my thinking on this has completely changed over the years. I used to believe that loyalty, just showing up year after year, automatically deserved annual pay rises and increasing respect. And to a point, that is true. Loyalty absolutely matters. However, I have observed in practice after practice, sometimes the most loyal team member is also the biggest barrier to growth. Not because they're bad people, not because they're by any means intentionally sabotaging anything, but because what the practice needs has evolved and they haven't evolved with it. And that's what I want to unpack today. So let me paint you a picture, and you may find it sounds familiar for some of you. You've got a team member who's been with you for years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. It might be the practice manager. It might be the receptionist. They're terrific with patients. They've got great relationships. They know all the patients know them. They know all of the practice systems inside out. They show up reliably every single day, right on time. They are exactly what you needed when they first started working with you. But now, all these years later, whenever you try to implement something new as a practice owner, you find that there is resistance with these great team members. It's not outright refusal. It's more like a subtle kind of pushback. They might say things like, "We tried that before and it didn't work." Or, "I know the patients and the patients won't like that." Or, "Not in this practice, that seems a bit too complicated." Now, often when we're talking about these kind of team members, these are also the team members that, because of their tenure, at their annual pay reviews, they do get CPI or more every single year. And that is a routine that everyone has gotten into. But when you look at their actual contribution to the growth of the practice, if growth is required for your dental practice, this is where a bit of resistance from the owner can come up, that you're not quite sure that you're totally happy giving this annual pay increase year after year, given that you've wanted to do these big changes or small changes, but you simply can't because you've got that resistant team member. And unfortunately, this is what I observe, that it gets really uncomfortable in these kind of situations because the practice owner starts to feel a little held hostage by the loyalty of this otherwise positive team member. It's like we owe them something because they have stayed. We absolutely owe them respect and fair treatment, absolutely. But do you owe them a front row seat on your growth journey if they're actively resisting that journey? So let's explore this a little more, Because it's not about good employees versus bad employees. It's about understanding that people operate at different levels of engagement during their tenure with your practice. So because of this situation, I have developed a bit of a engagement hierarchy. It's based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this will sound familiar to some people. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a pyramid with the broadest part of the pyramid down the bottom, and you progressively step up from one level to the next in terms of your needs as a human being. And I feel like that happens with employee engagement as well. So let me walk you through these quickly. And as I do, I want you to think about where you sit on this hierarchy if you are an actual team member and what you've observed as a practice owner. And as a practice owner, you were an employee at one point. You may recognize elements as I describe them as well. So the very base level, that broadest level down the bottom, we've got the survivor. And this is the kind of employee that has the thought of, I work to live. I don't work to have fun. I don't work to fulfill a hidden dream or passion. I work because I get paid. It's purely transactional. There's no emotional investment. These employees do the bare minimum to not get sacked. They watch the clock. They turn up right on 8 o'clock and they leave right on 5 o'clock with their handbag over their shoulder. This is quite often casual staff or people going through difficult times in their lives too. They haven't got the time and energy to devote anything more than they have to their workplace. And that's all okay. There are positions and jobs in this world where that suits beautifully. In dental practices, we tend to need a little bit more engagement because the work we do depends so much on great teamwork, and because the focus of the work we do are actual people, our patients. And so we generally would require a deeper level, a higher level of engagement than the survivor. Level 2 is the comfort seeker. This is the kind of employee that wants to enjoy the work that they do, but they don't necessarily want their world changed. This person will leave an unhappy workplace and seek out one that is very pleasant and makes them feel like they look forward to coming to work every day. They love harmony, they love routine, and they love familiarity. They're very competent. They know the systems. They've got good working characteristics. They're reliable, dependable. And for dental practices that aren't going through any growth or change, they're just perfect because their natural inclination is to resist change. Just give me what I know and expect. For whatever reason, change may feel threatening to their level of comfort or to their perception of their own competence or to their status within the team. And so if you are a great employee and you love turning up to work every day, yet you find yourself the one saying, I don't think that would work because of these different reasons. And you find yourself saying, I just don't like change. I just like to keep doing what's expected of me. And you don't have any aspirations to add additional skills or master additional responsibilities. I want you to know there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it at all, because it's absolutely desirable for a collection of dental practices. The problem only comes into play if there is a mismatch or a mismatch has developed over time where the practice wants to go in a different direction and you as an employee want to stay where you are. That's the only time this becomes an issue. And those practices that want to go into a different direction, and that might be offering different types of services, changing the structure of the practice itself and how it operates, expanding the team and getting more people on board, changing the focus on how we're managing our patients. What these kind of practices need, and these are, they could be a regular standard practice that's changed in terms of their values. And so they move into this space. The kind of employees that these kind of practices need are the impact makers. That's the next level of engagement up. This is the kind of employee that wants to be a part of the building of something successful. They actively invest in the success of the dental practice. They see their personal success tied to the success of the practice. So when the practice is going well, they feel a strong sense of fulfillment knowing they've played an active role in that. When change is proposed to an employee at this level of engagement, they see it as an opportunity. They get excited by it. They're thinking about all the ways it could be successful rather than raising all the reasons why it won't be successful. They recognise that during their growth journey, they're going to experience levels of discomfort, and that's okay with them. As long as they're supported well through that change, that's okay with them. And this is where that difficulty lies, when all of a sudden a practice has evolved to a point where they need more impact makers, and when they've got one of the main team members who will be responsible for some of that change, and they're the comfort seekers rather than the impact makers. Beyond the impact maker, the next higher level of engagement is the change driver. So these are usually your practice managers, your senior leaders within your practice. They don't just help you implement change, they're the ones that are coming up with the ideas of how to create it. They develop new systems, they're the ones looking at existing systems and talking about how we can evolve them so they keep up with the changing values of the practice. They coach other people how to get on board and how to move forward with these changes. And then beyond that, we've got usually the owner, and that's the highest level of engagement that I've come up with in my tiny brain. And this is the one that is, okay, I'm putting everything on the line, my finances, my free time, the level of responsibility I've got on my shoulders, I'm putting it all on the line, and I want to be the owner of this dental practice or this business or whatever the thing is. I'm willing to risk everything and be in command of my own destiny. They're taking ultimate responsibility for what they do every day. So I just want to make it clear, there are no judgments about your worth as a human being, wherever you find yourself sitting in that hierarchy of engagement. The descriptions are how we show up in terms of our behaviour and actions at work, how much we're willing to invest emotionally in our job. And there is no judgment around that, because what works for you works for you. So let me come back to what I mentioned at the start, this idea that loyalty alone deserves ongoing reward. I used to think loyalty automatically warranted annual pay rises of some kind. You've been here for 5 years, here's more money. You've been here for 10 years, you deserve even more. But here's something I've realised going into so many different dental practices and seeing this dynamic play out. Loyalty means you've stayed. That's all it means. It doesn't mean you've grown. It doesn't mean you've contributed to practice growth. It doesn't mean you've adapted as the practice has evolved. And what you've done in the past, if you are working in a practice that is trying to grow and evolve and you are the one being resistant, what you've done in the past has always met expectations. And on top of that, it hasn't been communicated to you that anything different was expected of you. And so you're not doing anything wrong. But what I want to do is create an environment of effective communication, that if a practice is going down a growth path and they have these wonderful loyal employees that need to step up in terms of their level of engagement to allow for that growth to happen, how do we have that conversation? I often find using an analogy and bringing it back to a situation that everyone is very familiar with as a better way of trying to understand a particular concept. And the analogy I've been using with team members is just to think of any relationship, not just a romantic one, but any relationship that you have. Imagine two people who start out perfectly aligned. Quite often these relationships start in high school or one of the earlier places that we started working in, or maybe it's a church group or a hobby group or sporting group. And we start off with a nice foundation of a strong relationship because we have so much stuff in common. But then something else that we all have experienced, as we grow and evolve, it is not always in parallel with the other person. Quite often, most of the time, it veers away from each other a little bit. Some people hang on to those younger relationships because they still have a lot in common. And despite the fact they've got other differences, such as when they go out onto different careers or they build a family or all the things that change in our lives over time, they still have enough in common to maintain those relationships. But how many of us have had relationships go by the wayside just through the natural evolution of our own lives? And it's obvious to look at that kind of scenario and recognize that neither person is wrong. They've just grown apart. What they want out of life, what they strive for, what they work towards is just no longer the same as each other. They've become different. And we always have this choice. We don't always make it very consciously. It normally just evolves. That we either grow together, and so we agree that, okay, we might start wanting different things, but let's agree on what's going to be good for both of us and move toward that together, which means both of you end up compromising. Sometimes one person compromises way more than the other. Or you acknowledge that what you want are different things and you respectfully part ways. And that's what I see in so many practices, that conversation not happening. It happens quite often the other way around, that the practice wants to remain the same. However, the employee wants to grow, wants greater opportunities for learning, wants to evolve in their career down a different path. And so they go to the boss and they say, I've loved my time here. I am going to be moving on because I want this stuff and I wouldn't expect the practice to conform to what I need and what I desire. And so I'm going to be moving on. So let's part ways happily. But it is the other way around, where there is an opportunity for greater levels of communication, where the practice themselves say, we're going off into this direction. And if you would like to jump on board and be there and be that level 3 impact maker, level of engagement that we need, we would love for you to join us on this journey. But if it's not what you want, then let's just happily part ways. Let's not be in a situation in a workplace where one party is expecting the other party to halt their growth, to stay the same despite the fact there is the desire to be something different. It does take, this concept of radical honesty. And it absolutely sounds scary because you don't want to make this person feel bad just for wanting a particular path for their world. They want things to remain the same. That's the stage of their employment that they're at, their career that they're at. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what if I want to, as a practice owner, I want to go over here now? Talking about it is the kindest thing we can do for each other. Because just like with our own personal relationships, unspoken concerns over time festers and they can result in resentment. And it can erode the relationship. So this level of communication, this radical honesty is actually a very kind thing. So I do encourage practice owners out there, if you are in this quandary, reach out. There's a way of having this conversation that is kind and respectful and considerate. It's not a performance review. It's got nothing to do with their level of performance. Their level of performance has been great up until the point that that practice wanted to go in a different path. It is what the conversation is about is this is where we've been, this is where we're now, this is where we're going. Do you want to play an active role in helping us move forward down that journey? You think about what kind of communication would result if, as a practice owner, you sat down with your long-term employee who's got great respect for you and you both like each other a lot. You've been working together for ages. And you say, I've changed as a practice owner. What I want for this practice now is different from what I wanted when you started with me 10 years ago. I want to grow significantly down this particular path. And I want it to be quick and managed well. I want to implement new systems to support that path. I want a team that can drive that growth with me. How do you feel about that new path? Are you evolving in the same direction? Or is there a possibility that we're going to start to grow apart? And then just ask them what their thoughts are. Quite often, we just stay in routine and don't like change just because it's comfortable in the moment. We're never called upon to ask ourselves, how do we feel about this change? What if it meant that I might have to seek a job somewhere else? Am I on board now? Then maybe I am. I'm capable of it. I've changed throughout my whole life and evolved and developed new skills. I know I'm capable of it. But it's never been put up in front of me like this. But now that it has, I'm going to consider it and think what's best for me. It might be I do want to stay the same. I've got other demands in my life with family and grandchildren and all the things. And so I want to maintain my working life the way it is. And considering the fact that I do like my boss so much and we get along so well and they want to grow, I don't want to stop them from growing. I don't want it to be the reason that stops them from achieving the dreams that they have, because their dreams are just as legitimate as my dreams of having my working life stay stable in the way it is right now. Again, no one's wrong. It's just we're evolving into a space where what we want out of our time here at this practice is changing, has evolved, are different now. So you're often left with three options that they genuinely want to go to level 3. They want to shift out of comfort and they want to shift into impact maker. They're willing to be uncomfortable during the changes because you're assuring them support every step of the way. It's safe to be outside the comfort zone here. And you set up a plan. And it could be not just for one team member, it could be for several. When we're going through changes, we need to be very clear about the expectations that we have of each other. Check in regularly with feedback to make sure all the changes are happening smoothly and we're overcoming any barriers, that we're allowing enough time to develop these new skills. And as people are delivering higher levels of productivity and performance, that there's going to be some sort of compensation around that. Because usually when practices go through growth, then revenue is increasing, which means we can now afford to make sure that our employees who have enabled that and been very active in those changes, that they're properly compensated. So that's option 1. Option 2 is that I'd just like to stay at level 2. that they have expressed a desire for that stability and routine not to change. And that's fine. But maybe they stay but in a more limited role in the practice, if you can accommodate that. And that they won't be part of these growth initiatives, because in order for these growth initiatives to have the best possible chance, we need supporters of it involved. And the naysayers, that's not going to work here, these are all the reasons why it won't work, that they're silenced and not sabotaging the rest of the team and their desire to grow. Or option 3, together, because of this frank and open, honest, respectful conversation, you decide to part ways. No drama, no blame, just two people who used to be really aligned and have both gone on two legitimately valuable different paths, parting ways. One of the key things is that the annual pay increases just for loyalty may not have relevance anymore. They used to have relevance for me for many, many years. And it's just because of what I've seen on a repeated basis in several practices that I've started to think, no, those automatic annual pay increases are more performance-based, contribution-based, support of the initiatives of the practice-based, rather than just because another year has passed. Because if someone is stuck in level 2, despite the fact that the practice owner wants to grow, that engagement level is hindering growth. It's not just keeping things neutral, it's hindering growth. And that has a ripple effect on the patients and the other team members and so many things. So if you are a practice owner and you are frustrated with a level 2 comfort seeker team member, and that team member is feeling constantly pressured and criticized and feeling they're not good enough all of a sudden, neither of you is winning. And I really believe that effective communication is the way forward for everyone, where everyone gets a chance to be happy. If you want to dive deeper into this, I have a downloadable framework that can guide you every step of the way through it. Reach out, info@dentalbusinessmastery.com.au. I'll be delighted to share it with you. Thanks for listening, and see you next episode. Bye for now. If you enjoyed this podcast, then I encourage you to head over to Ameena and my website, dentalbusinessmastery.com.au. You will find all the information that you need if you would like to gain our assistance in helping you and your team achieve great success.